Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Basics, a reference guide for mathematics. This is episode 7, and I'm going to break it up into 3 parts because otherwise it's going to be quite long. Anyway, we are subtracting positive and negative numbers. So in the first episode, we are going to discuss what it means to subtract, and then we're also going to be looking at subtracting on a number line. There's 2 different ways to look at subtraction on a number line. Then we're going to look at subtraction as taking things away. Adding was putting things together. Subtraction is taking things away. And then the rules of boxing, or adding the opposite, is probably the practical way to add integers or add positives and negative numbers, because you're not going to draw a number line or put little trinkets out to take away every time you need to add and subtract. So it's another way to do it. So what is subtraction? One way to think of subtraction as the difference between 2 quantities, or how far apart they are when they're plotted on a number line, like how many steps. But it does depend on which one is first. So if the top one is first and you subtract and you're finding the difference is positive. If the bottom one is first and you're finding the difference is negative. Next is taking away, and this will be in part 2 of this video, and that's where you actually have something and you take it away. But taking away depends entirely on what you had to begin with and then how much you're taking away. So if I have 3 and I'm taking away 2, that's great. If I have 3 and I want to take away 5, there is a problem. The last way is thinking of subtraction as adding the opposite. That's literally changing the subtraction sign to an addition sign and the second number to its opposite. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. Those are the 3 parts. Subtraction is difference. First, we're going to be looking at the difference between 2 positive numbers, such as 5 and 3. I know you know that 5 minus 3 is 2, but here's a way to look at it on a number line. Looking at a problem that you already know how to do is a great way to understand the concept to use with more complicated numbers. So if we put 5 and 3 on the number line, and then I find the difference between them, or how far it takes to go from the first one to the second one, you get 2, because it's positive because you started with a higher number and you went lower. So your answer is positive. Or if I switched it and did 3 minus 5, what would that equal? Well, this time I'm going to be starting from the lower number and going higher. Thus, it's a negative because I'm going higher. What if both numbers are negative? So if I look at negative 5 and negative 3, again, negative 5 is first, so I'm going to start with negative 5 and go up to negative 3. And my answer is negative 2. It's negative because I started with negative 5, which is a lower number than negative 3. If I switch it and I do negative 3 minus negative 5, I'm starting with a higher number and going to a lower number, so it's positive because I started with a higher number. Well, what if you have a mixture of both? What if you have a positive and a negative and you're subtracting, like these 2? So if I have negative 2 minus a positive 3, if I plot them both on the number line like I have here, then I go from the first number to the second number. So I start with negative 2 and I move up to positive 3. Because I started at a lower position and went higher, my answer is negative. And it's 5 spaces below, so therefore it's negative 5. If I switch it and I start with positive 2 and I go down to a negative 3, 2 is higher, I go down to negative 3, the answer is positive because I started with a higher number. So it's 5 spaces above, so it's positive. Whereas when it was switched, it was 5 spaces below, thus it was negative. There's another way to look at subtraction on a number line, and that's subtraction as movement, specifically going down. So if I'm subtracting 2 positives, such as the numbers we used before, 5 minus 3, then I have 5 minus 3, so it moves down 3 spaces and lands on 2. So 5 minus 3 is 2. Subtraction is a negative movement, but the dot stayed above 0, so thus your answer is positive. If I switch them and I have 3 minus 5, again, subtraction's a negative movement, but I'm starting at 3, and this time I'm going to go down 5 spaces. So 3 minus 5 goes down to negative 2. Subtraction is a negative movement, but this time the dot went below 0, thus my answer is negative. Subtracting a positive moves the position down the number line. So in both of these cases, we were subtracting a positive number. The first one, I was subtracting a positive 3. In the second one, I was subtracting a positive 5. So each time the movement went down the number line. Subtracting 2 negative numbers. So same thing, negative 5 minus negative 3. If I start with negative 5, I go down 3. However, I'm subtracting a negative which switches it so I actually go up 3, and that's why I end up on -2. So subtracting a negative does the reverse of subtraction, thus it actually adds. Now we switch it, -3 minus -5. So we start at -3 and we subtract 5, but we're subtracting a -5, so it actually goes up. And this time it crossed 0, so it went into the positive, so it's actually +2 is your answer. And you'll notice in both of those examples, when you subtracted a negative number, the position moved up the number line. So subtracting a positive, the position moved down. Subtracting a negative, it moved up. What if you combined? So subtracting a positive and a negative. So in the first example here, we have -2 minus +3. So I start at -2 and I subtract +3. Well, what we learned on the other page, if you're subtracting a positive, you're going to go down the number line. -3 moves down the number line. So down the number line from -2 is -5. In the other example, we start at +2, and this time we subtract a -3. So as we learned on the other slide, subtracting a -3 moves it up the number line and not down the number line. So minus -3 is just like adding 3. Subtracting a negative number moves the position up the number line. And the key here is what you're subtracting. Are you subtracting a positive number? Then you're actually going to subtract and go down. If you're subtracting a negative number, that's a positive movement because it's a double negative. You've heard that before. And this is a case when there actually is a double negative inside that box. You are subtracting a negative. Those are two opposites. Thus, they go do the opposite of subtract, which is add. So now I'm going to talk to you guys about something called a not. We're going to use language to teach math, and not just by speaking, but by understanding double negatives. In this first statement, I am at home. I am at home. It is a positive statement because I am at home, and there is nothing in that statement that is an undoer or a negative, because negative is an opposite. I am, the positive is the am. Second statement is, I am not at home. The not is the negative part of the statement. It negates am, so thus it is a negative statement. I am not at home. It is a negative way of stating where I am. Not negative as in good or bad, but just as in I'm stating the negative version, not I am at school. I'm saying I am not at home. What if we put two nots in there? I am not at home. We already discussed that not at home is a negative statement, but that not that's in front of that box negates what's in the box. So they cancels it out. If I'm not at home, then I am at home. It is a positive statement because I'm not at home. Thus, if I'm not at home, which is everywhere else except home, then I am at home. So it's a double negative. I am not at home. And in this statement here, you have 2 minus -3. That's like 2 minus the opposite of 3, or not subtracting 3. It's two negatives right next to each other, which negates it. Here's a thought. What about this statement? I am not at home. Well, not at home was negative, means I wasn't at home. Not at home meant I wasn't not at home, thus I was at home. If I'm not at home, where am I? The not at home is a positive. Not home is a negative, and I am somewhere besides home. Here's a sidebar. You can skip this if you wish, but you ever heard of people saying ain't got nothing or other such double negatives? Well, why does it mean the opposite of what it says? Because there's two negative thoughts there. Ain't is a word that is a negative. It undoes what's in front of it. Nothing is also an opposite or a negative, stating that something is empty. There is nothing there. So the reverse of this, or the opposite of this, is ain't got anything. So again, you still have the ain't there, which is a negative, but what are you negativing? So in ain't got nothing, I'm making the nothing negative. So the negative of nothing is anything. So when you say you ain't got nothing, then you do have something. It is full. If I say I ain't got anything, then I'm empty, because the anything has been negated by the ain't. That's the double negative. Pause as needed to copy your notes. We did the first part here, which is what is subtraction. Today we looked at the difference between two quantities. Things to remember are, if you're doing the difference between a larger quantity and a smaller quantity, your answer will be positive. If you're finding the difference between a smaller quantity and a larger quantity, your answer will be negative. Takeaway is in the next video. This has been part 1 of episode 7, looking at subtraction on a number line. In part 2, we will look at subtraction as taking things away. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.